With comics, you have an unlimited budget, and you can use as many special effects, props, and actors as you want. Those were the words of legendary comics artist Alex Ross, describing the creative process behind 1994's Marvels, in which the superhero painter casts actors Timothy Dalton as Tony Stark, Russell Johnson as Reed Richards, and even Patrick Stewart as Professor Charles Xavier long before he played the character on screen in 2000's X-Men. Ross is well known for using real-world models to bolster and enrich his photorealistic paintings of men in tights, but the tradition of quote-unquote casting actors as characters in the pages of comic books goes all the way back to the birth of the medium. Jack Kirby, celebrated king of comics and co-creator of much of the Marvel Universe, would often pull faces, costumes and props from film and television to inform his artwork. This was just one of the many ways that Kirby instilled a sense of life into his characters, contributing to the idea of the Marvel Universe as an extension of our own reality, the world outside your window. For readers, being able to identify who a hero or villain is based on can help us understand how the creators intended that character to be perceived, from their appearance to their mannerisms and even their personality and voice. Hey heroes, I'm Josh from Panels to Pixels, and these are the real-life inspirations behind some of our favourite Marvel superheroes. Robert Downey Jr. may have embodied Tony Stark, aka the Invincible Iron Man, on the big screen, but in the pages of 1960s comics, the character more closely resembled two other famous figures. Wanting to create the quintessential capitalist superhero that would subvert the spirit of Marvel Comics at the time, Stan Lee partly based the character on real-life genius, billionaire, playboy philanthropist Howard Hughes. Hughes was a well-known businessman, pilot, engineer, movie director, and one of the wealthiest men alive during his lifetime. Famously parodied by Mr. Burns in The Simpsons, the eccentric innovator became even more notorious for his bizarre and reclusive behaviour later in life. As Stan Lee put it, Howard Hughes was one of the most colourful men of our time. He was an inventor, an adventurer, a multi-billionaire, a ladies' man, and finally, a nutcase. Later in the comics, we're introduced to Tony's father, Howard Stark, whose name is a cheeky nod to the original inspiration behind Old Shellhead. Meanwhile, Iron Man co-creator and series artist Don Heck based Tony Stark's signature pencil mustache and neatly coiffed hair on the iconic 30s and 40s actor Errol Flynn. Known for swashbuckling roles in titles like 1938's The Adventures of Robin Hood, Errol Flynn was the ultimate Golden Age action hero, and it's clear to see how much he inspired the look and confident swagger of the Armoured Avenger. Here's one that is based purely on fan speculation and retcons, but it's just too fun not to mention. It's a popular little nugget of internet trivia that Dr. Stephen Strange was based on iconic horror actor Vincent Price. And while the resemblance between Price and the Sorcerer Supreme is undeniable, there's actually no concrete evidence to suggest any direct inspiration. As a matter of fact, in Strange's first appearance back in 1963, in Strange Tales issue 110, artist Steve Ditko depicted the character as vaguely Asian in the way that a lot of stereotypically mystic roles were filled in comics of the time. That being said, Price's over-the-top campy performances in supernatural horror flicks like House on Haunted Hill, The Pit and the Pendulum, and The Raven do offer an uncanny counterpart to Marvel's master of the mystic arts. You can feasibly see how future writers and artists might note this resemblance and run with it, and it was even later revealed that Stephen Strange's middle name is Vincent, as a tribute to the king of cult horror and noted gourmet cook. That's not a joke, by the way. Vincent Price wrote several cookbooks, and they are simultaneously amazing and awful. When Benedict Cumberbatch was first cast as the Good Doctor, I personally was very excited to see him bring some of Price's smooth voice suavity and flamboyant freakiness to the big screen. But instead we just got a generic American man. Oh well, if you want to imagine what a Vincent Price Doctor Strange movie might look like, you can check out films like 1963's The Raven, or his guest role on The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, in which he plays a very Doctor Strange-like warlock named Vincent Van Ghoul. This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creative and curious people like you. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and most importantly, get inspired. There are literally thousands of classes on there, from illustration, graphic design, animation, video editing, photography, music, and so much more. Recently, I've been getting really into toy and action figure photography because I'm a massive dweeb apparently. But the truth is, I'm a very amateur photographer. So I just went straight to Skillshare and I brushed up on the fundamentals of DSLR photography with Justin Bridges. This crash course gives you everything you need to know about all that confusing stuff like shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, so that you can take the stunning professional photos you've always dreamed of. What I really love about Skillshare is the combination of video lessons, which are great for visual learners like me, plus the class projects that encourage you to get creative and put your new skills into practice. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads and they're always launching new premium classes, so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. And the best part is, it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. But even better than that, for a limited time only, the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description below will get a free trial of premium membership. So whether you're a beginner, a pro, a dabbler, or a master, Skillshare has the tools you need to explore your creativity. Thanks, on with the show. I've always thought that Jack Kirby's Professor X, with his head like a big boiled egg and comically bushy eyebrows, was kinda weird looking. But when you consider who the model behind the character was, his unusual visage starts to make a lot more sense. Created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and first appearing in X-Men issue 1, cover dated September 1963, Professor Charles Xavier's appearance was based on Academy Award winner Yul Brynner. Best known for his iconic portrayal of King Mongkut in both the stage and film versions of The King and I, Brynner also had starring roles in 1956's The Ten Commandments, 1960's The Magnificent Seven, and 1973's Westworld. Known for his trademark shaved head, the Russian-American actor possessed a quiet nobility that was a natural fit for the founder of the X-Men. Now, it's hard for me not to hear the exquisitely cast Patrick Stewart's voice in my head when I read the Professor's comic book dialogue, but I can definitely imagine Yul Brynner playing the role in a 1960s film adaptation of Marvel's Merry Mutants. Mary Jane Watson, longtime love interest and one-time wife of Peter Parker, is often depicted as the quintessential girl next door. Her vibrant red hair, carefree personality, and counterculture cred made her a hit with fans when she was first fully introduced in Amazing Spider-Man issue 42 back in 1966. Series artist John Romita Sr., known for drawing handsome men and glamorous women, based Mary Jane directly on Anne Margaret's performance in the 1963 musical comedy Bye Bye Birdie. Here's John Romita to tell us more.
Actually, I think I based her partially on Anne Margaret.
Yeah, that's right.
I used Anne Margaret dimples and a cleft in the chin, and some of the full face smile that she had, because we were trying to make a girl that was very with it and very modern.
And so it was that Romita, alongside writer Stan Lee, hit the jackpot with Spider-Man's most enduring other half. But that wasn't the only time this creative team cast real-world actors as members of Spider-Man's supporting cast. The Kingpin is most commonly known by fans as the arch-enemy of Daredevil, but was originally introduced in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man, as one of the webhead's most formidable foes. The Kingpin's colossal character stood in stark contrast to the svelte supervillains that Spidey had previously fought. But as Spider-Man co-creator and original series artist Steve Ditko once explained, Stan believed the most effective villain was the heavyset one. He once mentioned the movie villain Sidney Greenstreet as a villain model, and thus in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man issue 50, with John Romita Sr. now pulling art duties, the Kingpin was born. Congratulations, Mrs. Fisk, it's a big, beautiful, bald baby boy. Here's what Romita had to say about the character's creation. Stan would come in and sometimes just pin a piece of paper with a name on it on my drawing board when I was out. This one was Kingpin of Crime, Master Criminal. When Stan did this, I'd do up some sketches and bring them in and ask what he thought. Now, some have argued that Wilson Fisk is directly inspired by the aforementioned Sidney Greenstreet, whose imposing figure allowed him to portray crooked crime bosses in movies such as 1941's The Maltese Falcon and 1942's Casablanca. Others, meanwhile, have suggested that the Kingpin is more closely modelled after Robert Middleton, a similarly rotund screen actor who was often cast as the archetypal ruthless villain. Either way, it's clear that Lee and Romita were drawing on these larger-than-life silver screen gangsters with the creation of Wilson Fisk. While we're on the subject of Spider-Man's rogues, I have to give a quick mention to J. Jonah Jameson, the loudmouth newspaper editor whose deep-rooted resentment for the Wallcrawler makes him one of the series' most underappreciated enemies. Character co-creator Stan Lee was never shy about revealing the inspiration behind the Daily Bugle publisher, stating that he modelled JJJ as a much grumpier version of himself. Later Spider-Man writer Jerry Conway agreed that Jameson was as close as Lee ever got to a self-portrayal, going even further to say, Just like Stan is a very complex and interesting guy who both has a tremendously charismatic part of himself and is an honestly decent guy who cares about people, he also has this incredible ability to go immediately to shallow. Just boom, right to shallow. And that's Jameson. In fact, in the years leading up to the development of Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie, Stan Lee even lobbied for the role of J. Jonah Jameson on screen, as the man himself explains.
And I always wanted to play him in the movie. I was so sorry that by the time the movie was made, I'm too old to play the role. Right. Well, I don't really think I'm too old, but obviously they do.
Right.
Morbius the Living Vampire may not be one of your favourite Marvel characters, but anybody who has been watching Panels to Pixels for a while will know that the blood-sucking anti-hero has a very special place in my heart. Created by Roy Thomas and Gil Kane, and originally introduced as a Spider-Man foe back in 1971, Dr. Michael Morbius transforms himself through an experiment gone wrong into the nefarious neck nibbler Morbius. Artist Gil Kane claimed to have based the character's appearance on actor Jack Palance, whose menacing presence made him famous for playing movie villains. In a curious twist of fate, the Academy Award-winning actor would later go on to portray Dracula in a 1973 British TV movie, proving that comic book artists can either predict the future or they're just really good at casting. Interestingly, this wasn't the only time that Palance's distinguished features were the inspo behind a comic book character, as it was reported that the actor's face, posture, mannerisms, and even voice provided the model for Jack Kirby's DC villain Darkseid. In a post-Hugh Jackman as Wolverine world, it's easy to forget that Logan is supposed to be 5 foot 3 inches of adamantium, muscle, and oh so much body hair. Although artist John Byrne didn't create Wolverine, he was instrumental in making the character one of the most popular superheroes of all time, during his legendary run on X-Men with writer Chris Claremont. In fact, prior to Byrne taking up art duties on the book, Claremont considered dropping Wolverine from the series, but John Byrne, a proud Canadian, fought to save his fellow Canuck. Byrne's Wolverine was rough, tough, and always fixing for a fight, and as it turns out, drew direct inspiration from a character in an obscure sports comedy released the same year the artist joined the title. As Byrne explained in a 2004 interview, "My Wolverine is an actor whose name I don't even know, who's on camera for all of 5 minutes in a Paul Newman hockey movie called Slapshot." That actor was Paul D'Amato, who played the character Dr. Hook in this 1977 cult classic film.
They don't call me Dr. Hook for nothing.
How you doing?
All right now, no high sticking, no tripping, no slashing. Major surgery. Open heart. I'm waiting for quiet. Yeah, you'll have quiet.
Now, full disclosure, I haven't seen Slapshot. I don't know anything about Paul D'Amato or his character, but this is just perfect. This is exactly what Wolverine should look like when he eventually joins the MCU. The kind of guy you would be very careful not to piss off in a bar. The kind of guy who tells you he's going hunting but doesn't carry a gun. The kind of guy you could believe has been around since the 19th century, pounding beers, chomping on cigars, and kicking asses. And while we're on the subject of Wolverine, John Byrne and many others have speculated that Frank Miller, who drew the first Wolverine miniseries in 1982, was channeling actor Clint Eastwood in the role, complete with furrowed brow, narrowed eyes, and gritted teeth. The Hellfire Club is a secret society in Marvel Comics, whose clandestine villainy often brings them into confrontation with the X-Men. If you don't know them from the comics, maybe you remember the Hellfire Club from 2011's X-Men First Class, in which Kevin Bacon as Sebastian Shaw attempts to manipulate the Cuban Missile Crisis to cause an all-out nuclear war. I rewatched that film recently, and hot take, it felt like going to the dentist. But you might be surprised to learn that the Hellfire Club was actually a real-world organisation, founded in London in 1718 by Philip, Duke of Wharton. This satirical gentleman's club was a place for political figures and wealthy elites to come together and engage in alcohol-fueled acts of blasphemy. Sounds fun. According to one source, members of the club would attend mock religious ceremonies dressed as characters from the Bible and dine on meals of ghost pie, breast of Venus, devil's loin, and hellfire punch. I swear to God I'm not making any of this up. The group was ultimately disbanded a few years later, when King George I put forward a bill against horrid impieties aimed at the immoral conduct of the Hellfire Club. But this idea of a group of powerful elites secretly indulging in depravity and debauchery behind closed doors has proven to be fairly influential in fiction. Namely in a 1966 episode of the British TV show The Avengers, titled A Touch of Brimstone, in which the main characters, John Steed and Emma Peel, infiltrate a modern incarnation of the Hellfire Club. It was from here that X-Men writer Chris Claremont and artist John Byrne drew inspiration for the Marvel Comics version of the club. And by drew inspiration, I mean copied almost entirely. As Byrne again explains, I first encountered Peter Wingard as an actor on the Avengers episode A Touch of Brimstone, which dealt with Steed and Emma having an encounter with the Hellfire Club. Later, he turned up on a British series called Department S, and its spin-off Jason King. When Chris decided he wanted to do a Hellfire Club arc in Uncanny X-Men as part of the Darkening of Phoenix, I suggested the in-joke of having Mastermind, in his disguised form, resemble Peter Wingard, and mixing character and actor that his name be Jason Wingard. While Mastermind was a character first created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby dating back to 1964, it was Claremont and Byrne who revealed his civilian name, crowned him Black King of the Hellfire Club, and made him an integral part of the Dark Phoenix saga. Emma Peel's BDSM-style disguise as the quote, Queen of Sin inspired the name and costume of Emma Frost, aka the White Queen, as well as the look of Jean Grey as the Black Queen. Meanwhile, the 1982 book X-Men Companion Volume 2 identifies the direct inspirations behind the rest of the founding Hellfire Club members, as Sebastian Shaw was based on British actor Robert Shaw, Donald Pierce was based on Canadian actor Donald Sutherland, and Harry Leland was based on American actor Orson Welles. Incidentally, the late Diana Riggs, who starred as Emma Peel in The Avengers, also inspired another Marvel superheroes look when artist David Aha based Kate Bishop's costume on this iconic purple catsuit. Monica Rambeau is perhaps best known now as Teyonah Parris' character in WandaVision, but many comic book readers will recognise her as the Captain Marvel of the 1980s. Created by writer Roger Stern and artist John Romita Jr., the character first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man Annual 16 in October 1982. When it came to designing the character, Romita Jr. originally intended Rambeau to resemble actor Pam Grier, the ass-kicking action star of many 1970s blaxploitation films, as well as her award-winning role as the titular character in Quentin Tarantino's Jackie Brown. Sadly, the character's appearance was changed before publication, as Romita explained in a 2008 interview. I just took some reference on Pam Grier because I always loved her, and at the last moment somebody said that, well, we need to use this woman here, because they thought maybe Pam Grier wasn't as good looking as the model they found. It was fine because by the time she got done by other artists, it ended up looking like the generic black character anyway. Kind of a burn on Pam Grier there from someone on Marvel's editorial staff of the 1980s, who no doubt looked like a two-paid ham dressed in a polyester suit. But still, whenever I pick up a comic starring Monica Rambeau, I like to picture Grier in the role. Finally, we have one of the most famous examples of a real-life actor being drawn into a comic book, and how it led to that same actor playing the character on screen. In the Ultimate Marvel universe of the early 2000s, an imprint of Marvel Comics that reimagined the company's heroes in the modern day, S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury was redesigned to look like Samuel L. Jackson. In 2002's The Ultimates, writer Mark Miller and artist Brian Hitch weren't shy about casting Jackson in the role, even going so far as to name-drop the Pulp Fiction actor directly. Samuel L. Jackson, a self-confessed comics nerd, discovered that his likeness had been used while flipping through the issue in a comic book store.
I guess I got the part because Mark Miller and some other people decided when they created the Ultimates that Nick Fury was physically me. So when I picked up that comic book in the comic store, it's kind of, I'm not sure I remember giving anybody the rights to use my image in a comic book. So when I called my managers and agents and they checked in with Marvel, they said, well, we're thinking of making the movies and we hope he'll be in them.
So thanks to a cheeky bit of likeness theft and a savvy agent, we got one of the best comic book movie moments of all time, and a character who has served as the connective tissue between 23 films and counting. In a case of life imitating art, imitating life imitating art, I guess, a version of the character who closely resembles Ultimate Nick Fury was even folded into the Marvel Universe proper, as original recipe Nick Fury's estranged son, Nick Fury Jr. Whew, who says comics are confusing? Thanks for watching this video. This was a fun one to research and write, so I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Thanks also to those who support the channel on Patreon over at patreon.com/panelstopixels. I want to give a special shout out to King Gig, who is the latest person to sign up at the Return of the Sinister Six level. Thanks King Gig, you rock! Make sure to subscribe to Panels to Pixels to see more stuff like this. Leave a like on this video, drop me a comment, follow me on Twitter at Panels to Pixels. I post a lot of dumb comic book things on there, and it's generally a good time. And take care of yourselves, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!